Not if you're always honest, it doesn't. If you switch from being dishonest to honest, yeah, you're going to get some fucking reactions. And it's what I call the transition phase. All my clients go through it. It can last up to a year, depending on how hard they're working, where they have to like break everything that they built and replace it. But once it's replaced, when you're honest all the time, then you're only surrounded by people who are supportive of that. You're only doing a job that welcomes you being that way. You're only in hobbies where it's perfectly aligned with what you like. And so you don't get all this resistance. I hardly ever have confrontations now.
Welcome to the How to Heart Show, helping men reconnect to the heart and empower others as the leaders they were born to be. I'm Vincent. My mission is to help you speak your truth, own your authenticity, and step into your power. The world needs the raw and authentic man right now. Join us if you're ready to make a change.
Hey, what's up, Lions, and welcome to the How to Heart Show. The nice guy. The nice guy syndrome has always been a big problem for me, but I also see with a lot of men struggling with the authentic self, but really trying to please everybody so they feel have like this control and this power. And that's how I always felt the need for control and the need for make everybody happy. But it was a really big downside for me. And eventually I got in contact with a specialist that I want to interview today, and his name is Dan Munro, and he's really an expert on the nice guy syndrome. And I really want to dive deeper into it because I feel like this topic is not talked about a lot, because once I heard him through a podcast and with his books, The Naked Truth and Nothing to Lose, I felt such connection with what he said, and I felt there's a way out to get out of the nice guy syndrome. It was such a good feeling for me to know, like, hey, I can get help with this. So I was so happy that I got in contact with Dan and reached out to him and have this interview. So I really want to welcome you, Dan, and yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, no problem, man. Thanks for having me on the show. And yeah, guys like you are kind of why I do this work. You know, I had a similar problem at the start where I couldn't find anyone else talking about it. There was like one book, and that was it. And then the people who do talk about nice guys generally don't have any real empathy for them or understanding of the syndrome. They're just talking about how they're losers and that kind of thing. So it was really hard for me to find anything when I was working on this stuff. I guess I always am working on it. But that's kind of been an approach in my life. Like, if I can't find it, then I'll create it, you know, and that's what brought us here, really.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I really want to go a little bit deep about who you are and what's your story, because also what I've read from you and listening to, or also reading the work that you did, you've also been a nice guy. So what was it for you? Tell us more about you in a nutshell.
Yeah, well, it wasn't until I was about 25 years old that I realized something was wrong. Well, I guess I always knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. I always thought it was other things. But as far as my earliest memories go back to, I've been what we call a nice guy. Yeah, nice guy syndrome. There's different types of nice guys, and my particular type is what I call the performer. So I use sort of extroverted performances to impress people and make them like me. When I was a little kid, I was the class clown, but I was also the best speller, and I played all the sports, and I just kind of impressed people. And that was all, at that time, an unsophisticated strategy to fit in. I'd really struggled when I was a kid to make friends and stuff because my parents moved a lot when I was quite young. And so when they finally settled down, I felt quite desperate to get in and make friends. I felt like I hadn't had any friends, and I was already 7 years old or whatever, 8 years old. And then I kind of stumbled onto this idea that I'm funny and that I know how to make people laugh, and I have this kind of gift for knowing what to say to a person to make them laugh. And I was also academically gifted. That comes from my genetics. You know, I've got a high IQ and I can do well in school. And so even if I don't like the topic, I can get A marks, I can get the high marks and impress the teachers and my parents. So I had a way to impress kids with being funny and a way to impress adults with being high performing or high achieving. And that finally started to get what I wanted. I started to have people who liked me at both levels, adult and kid. And up until then, I'd felt like that was impossible and that I was sort of left out and I was this weird, like, alien. And so that, you might say, worked, shall we say. And that's how nice guy syndrome always starts. It seems to work at the beginning, either to increase pleasure or reduce pain or both. And so I just kept doing that because that was my little formula. And then once I hit puberty, probably around that time, this became very fixated on girls. I started to notice that my friends around me were advancing and progressing with relationships with girls, starting to have sexual experiences and dating and girlfriends. And I was falling behind. It just wasn't quite happening for me. I didn't know how they were making it happen. I didn't see the secret moves that they were doing or whatever took place. I'd find out that a friend of mine has a girlfriend. I'm just sitting there like, how? How'd you go from not having a girlfriend to having one? What is that? How'd you leap that gap? And I just doubled down on what I was already doing, being really nice and funny and helpful and, just a joy to be around. And I ended up surrounded by what I called friends at the time. I was very kind of not the most popular kid exactly, but not hated by anyone. I fit in with anyone. I had lots and lots of friends. I was in this band at school, which made me kind of cool. And, I played in the rugby team, did all the right things to be liked. And I had lots of girls that would say, like, I'm the best guy ever, and they wish they could have a boyfriend like me. And I had all that stuff starting. I figured, well, this is positive feedback, like, I'm on track here. This is a good approach. But yeah, the years ticked by and still really nothing was happening with girls, and that was my major fixation. And then I got a girlfriend, or should I say she got me, because I made none of the moves. She did everything. It wouldn't have happened if she hadn't. And that's when my nice guy syndrome really blossomed. I was into a long-term relationship, and I just became absolutely obsessed with keeping her happy all the time. Everything I did was in consideration of her happiness. I was always thinking about what would be the best move to give her the most joy and pleasure, kind of thing. And she was a nice girl. She was a decent girl, but she had some emotional issues and she had a difficult family. So there was lots for me to work with. I got to play the fixing caretaker role there. I got to solve lots of her problems, prevent problems. I felt really valuable doing that. And then after a couple of years, 2.5 years, she just randomly dumped me out of nowhere. I didn't see that coming. I thought I was going to marry her, and just left me for some other dude just out of nowhere. And I was absolutely devastated because the thing I'd been trying, the approach I'd been invested in my whole life just got thrown in the toilet. Like I hadn't earned any points, kind of thing. And so then I was really lost, and now I had no dating experience for a few years. I just kind of fall into the first relationship that would have me. And now I'm in the adult world almost. I'm like a 19 or 20-year-old. I can't remember when this happened exactly. And I had no fucking idea what I was doing, both with friendships, which had fallen away a bit because I'd been lost in this relationship, and with girls. And so I just reverted back to my old strategy of being really funny and impressive. And now I was getting really lonely at this point. So at this point now, I was like, I'd be invited to parties and I'd be the funny guy and center of attention. And again, I had this circle of friends that had girls in it who said I was this great guy. But more and more, I started to feel detached from people. And I just couldn't get things to move into any form of intimacy. It was always superficial. People often forgot about me. My so-called friends would forget to invite me to stuff. Not because they didn't like me, but because they had no connection with me. So it didn't occur to them to think of me, And I went to university and I had no real friends there. I didn't know how to make new friends. I couldn't seem to fit in with them. And I was, the way they call it now, incel. I was involuntarily celibate for 4 years, despite my best efforts. Unlike incels, I was actually trying with girls, but it's just getting nowhere. And from there, I got desperate, and that's when I got into the whole pickup artist thing. I did a couple of years going down that dark tunnel. And then eventually from there, I discovered honesty. And that's about where the transition starts to happen. So I'll stop there because that's where I start to learn about nice guy syndrome and change it. But that was the build up to it. Basically a life of kind of feeling like an alien while trying my best.
Well, then I really didn't want to cut you off because what you said is really, yeah, good to talk about. But you lost connection, so I cannot see you. So
Yeah, just go through with
hopefully
it.
it's gonna, yeah, hopefully it's gonna change. But yeah, thank you so much for your story. What really got intrigued for me to interview you is your journey, especially also what I recognize is also for myself. I was really like so fixated on girls and being liked by other people, and also to get intimate with them, that it was also for me really really hard to connect because I got also so obsessed with the pickup industry. I was trying so hard for people to like me and girls to like me, but in the end it really backfired and it didn't really go as I wanted to go. So what I'm really curious is for you, how did you come to understand that you are a nice guy or that you are a nice guy? What was for you the red flags, like, hey, okay, I'm a nice guy now. Now I need to do something about it.
There was no one incident that gave me all the information at once. It was lots and lots of little pieces of feedback that built up over the years. I mean, I was getting feedback my whole life, but I wasn't hearing it. A lot of time because it was positive feedback or appeared to be positive feedback. Somebody's like, "Oh, you're the nicest guy." I wouldn't think that's actually a critique. Or people saying like, "Oh, you never have a problem with anything," or "You're always so calm," or whatever. I took these as compliments rather than as warnings. Like, nobody should be like this. This is not human. Those were kind of like subconscious pieces of data that sat in my mind. Because when I heard them, a part of me sort of clicked like, I'm hearing something I need to listen to, but I just ignored it and moved on. And then every now and then I'd get a big piece of feedback. I remember one particular girl, I was in a hot tub with her. This was my attempt to get with her, and it wasn't working as usual. And I was making her laugh by making fun of myself. That was a thing that I did a lot. That's how I made people laugh, is, quite nasty things I'd say about myself. And she said something like, I think this is in my book, she said something like, "You are really funny in a charming sort of way, but it's also really pathetic that you talk that way about yourself." And I was just like, whoa, because I hated getting negative feedback. I just hated her after that, and I didn't click that what she was saying was a very, very helpful piece of feedback. She was saying like, "You're pathetic the way the way you see yourself, the way others see you. Like, they're laughing because it's funny." But it makes me think of those comedians where you're laughing and they're taking the piss out of themselves, and you're laughing, but you're laughing at them, not with them. And there's a part of you that's like sad when you hear the joke. It's just like, oh, dude, you actually think that about yourself? Like, maybe you should get some therapy or something. I didn't realize I was creating that effect in other people that, yeah, they were laughing, but they weren't like respecting me. They weren't seeing me as somebody they look up to or admire. They're more like laughing at the clown. And so I got lots of little pieces like feedback like that. And then it wasn't until after I started experimenting with being really honest with people and noticing a completely different reaction that I'd ever had before in my life. I was finally getting into conflicts and letting it happen and having like confrontations with people and setting boundaries. And I was showing attraction to people, which I'd never done before, and actually getting positive results from that, as well as negative ones, and having to face all my fears around that. And it's just this whole new, like, lively world where my social life was so much more polarized. People were loving me and hating me rather than just liking me. And that it was actually after I got into it and sort of looked backwards that I realized, oh, I can see what's been wrong this whole time now. I can see what's been missing. And it was around that time when I was just experimenting with honesty that I found the book, No More Mr. Nice Guy. And that's when all my suspicions were like validated and clarified. I read the book. I'm like, oh, fuck, is this what it is? Like, every page, man. Like, I've never read a book like that.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of, nonfiction, self-development type books, philosophy. I've never read a book where every page was just me to the core.
Mm-hmm.
And that book was, I'd say 98% of that book was relevant to me, and it felt like somebody had studied me and was writing about me. I just felt so called out, but relieved. I'm like, okay, this thing's got a name. There's a system to it. There's a reason it happens. And in that, I can see the recipe to get out of this. And the recipe to get out of this is to actually be who I really am, as cheesy as that sounds. But I'd been a nice guy for so long. I think I talk about it in the book as method acting. Like, I'd been pretending for so long that the pretense had become who I was. It was so consistent and so regular that I lost sight of the idea that there's somebody underneath this who isn't this. Somebody just watching. Somebody has to come up with the lie and pretend and adjust to people, which means I must be starting at a different place. Like, there must be a starting point that is really me, and then it adjusts and modifies itself to please people. So what is that starting point? Who am I before the bullshit starts? And I just became obsessed with figuring that answer out. Like, I wanted to know who I really was. And that was where honesty played such a big role. I was like, if I'm honest all the time, I get to hear what I actually think. I get to see what I actually feel, where my opinions stand, like what I stand for and against, what I actually believe in. I was finding out the same time as other people I was telling, you know? I'd be telling someone what I'm thinking and going, holy shit, I've never said that before. That is what I think. Holy shit, like, I didn't know that's what I thought. I'd always had to change it before it came out. So I'd never, like, let it just come out raw, you know? And then so it became like this kind of, like a tennis game back and forward where I'd try to be more honest. And then through that, I'd find out more about myself, which would help me be more honest, and it would go back and forward like that. And I kind of figured out who I was by just trying to speak honestly. And then I realized I'd never tried that before. I'd tried everything else. Being nice, the pickup artist thing, playing it cool, being in a band. I tried all these different methods. I never tried just saying what I actually think. That's the one thing I wasn't allowed to do before. And then I tried doing that, and I was like, oh, okay, that's what's been missing. You know, the one thing I hadn't tried turns out to be the thing, you know?
It usually is. We always make it so hard for ourselves that we overlook the things that's necessary for us to change. But it was also for me the same once I read the No More Mr. Nice Guy, I had the same thing. It was like, okay, this is me, check, 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 check. But really what for me, it was really hard to make the change. How was it for you to realize, okay, I have this nice guy syndrome? How hard was it for you to make the change, or was there something that you found like really easy and make the change for that?
Well, it was in little pieces. I didn't have some overnight blast where I just came out of my cocoon as a new thing. It was just gradual, incremental changes from one behavior to another, sort of more real being brought in bit by bit, as much as my courage would let me handle on the day. And sometimes I go back down a few steps and come back up and so on. It was more like that as a journey. But the real catalyst for me, I think, was doing the pickup artist thing. That was like my last hope. I was like, okay, if I can just figure out how to basically manipulate women into liking me, at least I'll have that, you know? And then I figured that out, and I was so unsatisfying. You know, I was having girls come home with me and laugh at all my jokes and whatever and chase me and all those things I'd ever dreamed of. But it felt like they were just in love with the act. It was like if I was an actor in a movie and they loved the character but not the guy playing the character. I was like, I had this really rough night. I think, I spoke about it in the book, where I took a girl home with me after just bullshitting her all night long with this pickup stuff. And I got to the point where I'm like, I'm not even sure this counts as consent, because she thinks she's sleeping with this other guy who I'm not. Like, if she knew who I really was, I don't think she'd be here. So is this rape? Does this count? Like, and I was really like, and that's when I realized the nice guy thing has always come from a genuine niceness. I always have actually cared about people and not wanted to harm people. There are nice guys who aren't that way. This being nice thing is they don't actually care about people at all. They're quite happy to harm people to get what they want. I've never been that guy. And so eventually I sort of took my head out of the sand with the pickup thing and thought, man, this manipulation shit's just harmful. I'm controlling people. I'm not giving them like the freedom of choice. I'm short-circuiting their psychology to get my needs met and not even caring about their own. And I was just distraught because I was like, well, that was my last thing. If this doesn't work, now what? The rest of my life just nothing? Can't be a nice guy. Can't be this manipulating, seducing guy. That classic, as I talk about it, the kind of black and white fallacy that nice guys have. I have to be nice or I have to be a jerk. There's nothing else available. But about that time, just near the end of the pickup thing, I was doing these street approaches. I was going up to girls on the street. And at first it was just part of a routine. I was just telling them I was attracted to them right up front. First thing I said to them. And that was a big deal for me because I'd never said that directly to a girl like that before. Even when I was doing the pickup stuff, I was still very indirect. And it became so thrilling just to say that I didn't actually care if they liked me or not anymore. I was just like, how many times can I say it today? And then I stopped using it as a script and just started to look at a girl and actually think what I liked about her and try and say it. And that was my kind of floating away from pickup. It became more important for me to say what I actually thought than get the girl. And the strategy just started wearing off. And like I said, this wasn't overnight. This was like one conversation at a time. I just became this ever more obsessed with this idea of honesty. It just felt like this brand new ground that I had never broken before. I'd never gone there before. And then it became about more than girls. I was starting to confront my boss at work and was telling my friends what I was really into, even though they judged me. And all these other bits of honesty started emerging. And it's like I said, being honest helped me be more honest. And it just became this incremental, small step at a time thing, which is kind of what I coach and mentor people to do now, which is I just help them be a little bit more honest every day. And eventually it picks up this kind of steam, this momentum. Now, there's more to it than honesty. Some nice guys, honesty isn't actually even their main problem. Perhaps courage is, perhaps responsibility. I was always an action taker, so courage wasn't really my issue so much. I can do things I'm afraid of. I had been my whole life. I just didn't know what to do. That was usually my problem. So I was putting a lot of effort into the wrong areas. Whereas there are other nice guys I work with where they're fully aware of what they should be doing, but their knees just shake at the thought of it and they can't get off the ground. And they need a different approach. It's more about they need to learn how to be courageous more than they need to learn how to be honest. They need to break down bravery into these step-by-step systems that they can apply where they're never too uncomfortable to keep moving forward, But for me, I've always just been like, a dog on the scent. If you point me in the right direction, I'll go hard out in that direction. I just spent 25 years running in circles. I'm ready to run. I just didn't know where to go, I just didn't get that answer of what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And also with the pickup, there was for me also, the downfall. And what you said, I always need to have tactics and tricks up my sleeve to manipulate them in a certain way, but you're not in your authentic self. I want to make the jump because you mentioned you're also coaching and helping men. So what do you see? Because maybe people are listening to this like a nice guy. I'm not a nice guy. I'm just a good guy. So how can you explain what it is to be a nice guy? What are the traits to be a nice guy, and that they have awareness from, okay, if you tell them in a certain way that they approach people or they talk to people, that they know, okay, so this is a nice guy, and how to change that. Because for me, like I said, I just found out because of you and about Dr. Robert Clover's book, No More Mr. Nice Guy. So can you explain a little bit what it is to be a nice guy? What are the traits and how to change that?
It's hard to give a concise answer to that because there's so much going on there, and no two nice guys are exactly the same. It's important to point that out. In fact, they can be quite different, just have some core traits in common. I think the best thing to talk about is the core traits that they generally have in common. But keep in mind, there's lots of nuance. So an extroverted nice guy and an introverted nice guy will present quite differently. One might be a bit of a show-off like me, and the other one might hide in the background so nobody sees him. And they're both coming from the same... Right. So it comes from the same insecurity, but just different strategy. My strategy is make you like me, and your strategy might be avoid you disliking me. It's to get the same result of being liked, but just coming at it from different angles. A lot of the nice guys I speak to aren't aware that they're a nice guy until I start calling out the various behaviors and stuff and going, well, that's all by the book, For me, it was easy because I literally called myself a nice guy in my head. That was my title before I read a book or anything, and even heard anyone else say it. I always thought of myself as this really nice guy, and other people called me that. That can be a warning sign if you get called that a lot. Like, girls don't say that to guys that they're really attracted to. They don't say that to guys they think of as confident, as leaders, as, likely to be great fathers. They don't say the word nice. And so if you hear the word nice a lot in your life from people in your social life, that's a bit of a red flag. It's a word they might sound like they like you, and maybe they do, or they think they do, but it's not a word we use when we talk about someone we respect. And so that's a key element is, am I respected or am I liked? Because those are not the same thing. If everyone's very pleasant to me and treats me well and talks well about me, that's one thing. But do they stick to the boundaries I set? Are they worried about how I'll react if they're disrespectful and upsetting? There's a difference between how people treat you when they respect you versus they can respect and like you. They can respect and dislike you. But if they just like you because you're nice, that's not respect. So one of the key things to figure out, am I a nice guy or not? Start with the position like, are your social relationships going the way you think they should? Now, you might have lots of friends, but do you feel intimately connected? Do you feel like they'd be loyal to you no matter what happened? Do you feel that they would respect boundaries that you set? Have you tested this and proven it to be true? Or are you worried that you would lose them? That this is conditional love, that you have to provide some value or otherwise they lose interest? That's a warning sign of nice guy syndrome. Like I said, I was the funny guy in my group, but if they found another funny guy, they just forgot to invite me. Position's been filled. And yet there'd be guys I thought of as boring who got invited every time because they had intimate connections with everyone. They were actually friends. And they got invited because they're friends. There's no other reason to invite them. They don't need to provide. They could be in a bad mood. Doesn't matter. But me, I had to be on form or otherwise there's no point in bringing me to the party. Do you struggle in romantic relationships? Particularly, do you find that either you can't get them off the ground and can't get started, even though girls generally seem to be, they seem to like you when you're around them socially, they don't seem to be repulsed by you or hate you, but nothing seems to move forward romantically? Or, and this again, the difference is in nice guys, you can have serial monogamous nice guys who have had lots and lots of relationships. But if you observe them in the relationship, they're under the thumb. The relationship always loses its sexual friction after a while, and resentment builds, and it inevitably ends with a feeling of like, we're just flatmates now, we're just friends, something died. You'd find that you're not respected by your wife or your partner, you're afraid of her, that you change the way you behave around you, maybe you even change the pitch of your voice when you're talking to her to try and prevent her from getting upset, to try and keep her happy. Ultimately, nice guy syndrome is about control. It's about controlling other people's emotions to control your own. Make them happy, make them like you, make them think of you as a good person, secure your reputation as a nice person, as a decent guy, so that you can relax, so that you don't feel threatened about them, so that you can like yourself, because your confidence is totally dependent on how they see you. One way to know you have nice guy syndrome is you like yourself until somebody disapproves of you. And suddenly you doubt yourself, and suddenly you hate yourself. Suddenly you feel like you need to fix something. Confident person just goes, if you don't like me, you don't like me. So be it. They don't rebel against it. They don't get angry about it. They don't try and fix it. If your happiness in life basically depends on other people liking you and thinking you're a good person, or whatever it is you wish that they thought of you, if you need that, that's a big warning sign, especially if you notice that you change your behavior to make that more likely. There's kind of nothing wrong with hoping that people like you and hoping that they see you as a good guy. The problem is when you're willing to compromise who you are to make that outcome happen. You're willing to lie. You're willing to hide information. You're willing to pretend you feel something you don't. You're willing to do activities you don't really like, or compromise your integrity to participate in things that you don't actually agree with. When you're not willing to lose your job to stand up to your boss, you're not willing to lose your relationship to stand up to your girlfriend, you're not willing to lose your friends to show them that you're interested in something that they think is stupid. These are all the warning signs. Nice guy syndrome is essentially, I put on this mask of the guy you want me to be so that you don't hate me. And hopefully so that you like me, but not like me too much, because I don't like intimacy. Just about there, stay about that far away. That's about perfect. Like me, but don't know who I really am. That would be perfect. Thank you. And another way to look at it, Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I had a really important question because, like you said, it's so important to notice it. But the question that came to me was, where does the nice guy start? Is it becoming from trauma? Is it becoming from pain? Is it becoming from rejection? Where does it start? Do you know that, or have you seen it with your clients?
I've never seen a case where I can't track it back to childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there may be such cases, I've just never seen that. And the trauma specialist, Dr. Gabor Mate, says he's absolutely convinced that anybody who's traumatized as an adult, it started in childhood. If we have an untraumatic or non-traumatic childhood, we generally don't get traumatized as adults. All right, and there's actually evidence to show this with people, coming back from war with PTSD. It's only the ones who
Yeah.
are already traumatized that get the PTSD. The ones who don't, they just come back like that sucked, and they carry on. It's 100% childhood trauma. One way to look at it, to oversimplify it, to cover all types of nice guys, is that you had a situation that was very painful for you socially as a kid, and then you came up with a strategy to reduce that pain, and that strategy became the nice guy syndrome. It should really just be called the nice guy strategy. So you're a kid, let's say it could be all sorts of things. For example, my key thing was that I had really strict parents that were hard to impress, and that I was always like in trouble for things that I couldn't even guess. I tried my best to behave and I still got in trouble. The rules changed every day. And socially, like I said, I moved schools a lot. It was hard for me to keep a best friend. My friends always got taken away from me randomly as my parents moved. So I became sort of very desperate to find a way to not only get friends quickly, but not become too attached to them. So if they're taken away, I don't get my heart broken, kind of thing. So that was my childhood trauma. One is this kind of what they call an avoidant attachment style, where I want people, but I don't want them too close because it keeps hurting. And then the kind of trauma that comes from strict parenting. I mean, the research shows that kids with strict parenting are something like 3 times more likely to be dishonest than kids from other parenting styles. Like, strict parents create liars. And I was a very good liar as a kid because that's the only way I could have a life. The only way I could play with friends or whatever was to sneak out of home because I was grounded all the time. The only way I could.
Survival, right?
Yeah. It's like I was in trouble if they found out anything about me. That's the impression I got. So I was like, well, let's make sure they never find anything out except for the stuff that they like. They can find out about my good marks, and they can find out about what a good boy I am and how well I do at sport. But they can't find out that I tried to smoke cigarettes, and they can't find out that me and my friend were drawing naked ladies, and they can't find out any of that stuff because I would definitely get in some sort of trouble. And it wasn't until I was in my teen years that I saw that other kids don't get in trouble for this kind of stuff. When I had my first friends who were smoking in front of their parents, and we were only 13 or whatever, and their parents figured, well, it's better you do it in front of me than behind my back because you're going to do it anyway. I was like, whoa, I didn't even know that parenting style existed. My parenting style was do not get fucking caught, no matter what. Don't tell them anything, even if it's for your own safety. Don't tell them. Find someone else to talk to. Because the first thing they're going to do is say, you're a bad boy, you're in trouble. And there's going to be like a really unfair level of punishment. So, the stuff that my friends would get told off for, I got grounded for a month, right? Or I got all my privileges taken away for 6 months or something, just this like really unfair sentencing compared to my friends. And the trauma can be really different. I got one client, he got beaten up by his dad 3 or 4 times a week. I never really got violent. I never really received violence as a kid. And as a teenager, I went to a rough school and there was a bit of violence there, but not from my parents. I have another client who was enmeshed, so his mother treated him like a partner more than a kid and was always complaining about his dad to him and, treating him like her best gossipy girlfriend, and that just fucked him up emotionally, especially because he was also on the autistic spectrum. Lots of my clients are on the autistic spectrum and they just got treated weird at school. Maybe outright bullying, or maybe just not quite fitting in and not understanding how things go. I mean, that's enough for trauma. To go to school every day anxious, like, Jesus, how do I play this game? How's it going to go badly again today? Bullying creates huge amounts of trauma. I think bullying's almost worse than having abusive parents, almost. If those abusive parents are also loving, and it's just a mixture. Because bullying is like, especially once you start going to school, especially around the age of 8, 9, or 10 years, being in socially is more important than being loved by your parents. The power shifts, The research shows that our biggest influences after the age of 10 are actually our friends, not our parents. And our parents never have that level of influence ever again. So if you found that you started to get really worried socially in high school more than any other time, then this isn't really about parents. This is about teenagers. And you just weren't in the right position. You didn't go to the right school with the right attitude and personality to be one of the cool kids, or at least one of the accepted kids. And as you probably know, once you go to school, if you don't fit in immediately, you can't ever get in. You're out permanently until you change schools. Like, once you're in the weird kid group, you're fucked, right? It's very hard to get rid of that. You have to suddenly do real well at sports or something to like kind of break that. Very few people get out of their initial cliques. And that can be traumatic. I mean, yeah, I just remember that often going to school and just thinking, God, I hope certain friends are here today, because if they're not, what am I going to do? Like, walk around school by myself? Like, just waiting for lunchtime to be over? You know, it was really hard. So, yeah, to answer your question, any kind of trauma where you found that pleasing others or avoiding disapproval relieved the pain and made you feel safer and just at least helped you survive to the end of the day, to get through another day. And then basically you get what's called arrested development, as you stop developing once you find that strategy and you just keep it. And then as an adult, you're still using that same strategy, even though it stopped working a long time ago, you know? And that's just the classic nice guy case. I got guys who are in their 50s behaving like abused little children, right? They're still using the same approach. Their wife yells at them, they're like, sorry, and they try to fix it like some 7-year-old who's got no power. I'm like, dude, just tell her to shut up. Like, you're fully, what's he going to do? Suplex you? You're a fully grown man. But he's behaving like this little child, you know? And because he is.
Yeah.
He still is.
Yeah, I can really see that with myself. Yeah, I can really see that with myself. Just my traumas was causing me really to be in my nice guy, and just not saying to people like, hey, what you're telling me, I don't like that. I was not coming up for myself. I was just always like soothe them and avoiding, and it was so annoying because I saw I was making it so hard for myself, not telling people the truth or how I felt. I was causing more problems because I was not telling this person how I felt, but he didn't know how I felt. So there was this conflict and confusion. It was getting worse and worse and worse. And then I just exploded and I started crying and was like, damn, I need to stop doing this. But it's so hard because I was always going back to that safe codependency, just be, constantly safe. But I was making it so hard for myself. And that was for me really like an eye opener that I need to make the change. And yeah, it's still really difficult because, like you mentioned also in your story, it's so easy to go back in that old habit because it's safe. And yeah, that for me is still the struggle to get out of it. And also with pickup, it's also really toxic. And what I really like from you is that you change everything to be authentic and really speak up and really talk how you feel about certain things. And that's so important, right? That you really speak your mind, how you feel, not be rude, but really like tell the person like, hey, if they try to make a joke and you don't like it, just tell them. But we just go with it, not to offend them. So how is that point of view for you, that we, if the nice guys are listening to this, and what can advice can you give them, like, hey, start with this to change? Because what I've noticed, and also from your books, is once you apply to show up more and say like, hey, this is not correct, or tell your boss how you feel, or you want to have a raise, a lot of changes, a lot of door open. So how was it for you and also for your clients to see that?
Yeah, I tell you what, the biggest struggle most people have is letting go of the idea that the
Yeah.
nice guy is a good idea. You know, we get so much positive validation for being nice, and so much fear and negative invalidation for being something else, that we come to believe in that conditioning. So, like being easygoing, like you're talking about before, just smoothing everything over. We've been conditioned our whole life to believe that's the most helpful thing to do, and that we're a good person. And the weirdest sort of psychological concept I've ever observed in humans is that we will die for our identities, even if they're a toxic, unhelpful identity.
Yeah.
So once we decide that we're a nice guy, then we go to war to keep it that way. And we will ignore information that discredits it. and cling to any information that seems to validate it. And the first real step is to just let go of the certainty that it's the right way. That just because it's called nice doesn't mean that it is. And just because everyone says you're a good person doesn't mean that you are. That maybe this is all like a hoax, an illusion. That being a truly generous, helpful, kind person requires a really different approach. Like, I help people with coaching. I'm not nice to them. I don't make them feel happy in the sessions. We might have a laugh occasionally, but most of the time they're quite uncomfortable during the sessions. And that's what's best for them. That's how you really help a fucker. You make him very uncomfortable with doing things that he knows he shouldn't be doing. What happens next? He stops doing those things and does something else instead, and his life gets better. So this idea that being nice to people is good, just to first off just let go of your certainty in that. That what if that's a lie? What if being a good person is actually different to that? It might retain some elements of it, but it needs other stuff, like having a fucking spine, having some balls, standing up for yourself to others so that they know who you really are. That actually makes you safer for them. If they have to guess what you really want and who you really are, that's a very unsafe position for them. As you noticed yourself, occasionally nice guys snap and they explode. That's really fucking dangerous. It often leads to things like murder. Right? I used to work with murderers. I was a probation officer. About half of them were nice guys who snapped and killed their wives. Right? Honestly, about 50% of the murderers I worked with didn't have a criminal record until they finally snapped. And then they did the worst possible thing. And that is not an exaggeration. That's how bad nice guy syndrome is. It's a building toxicity of all this suppressed emotion, all this denial of our wants and needs, all this pretense. It doesn't go anywhere. It just sits and it condenses, and eventually you snap under the pressure. The mind can only handle so much deception before it snaps. So if you can let go of the idea that being nice is good, or at least just let go of your grip on it a little bit and go, well, what other options are there out there? Is this really the best I can be? If it's fake, is there a real version of me that's even better? Right? Just opening your mind to that. And then in terms of practical, like I said, for most nice guys, it's about being just a little bit more honest. And in particular, what I call confrontation. Confrontation doesn't necessarily mean like an argument. It doesn't always mean boundary setting, but that's a lot of it. It's more about saying things that you're not comfortable saying. That's what a confrontation really is. We don't actually know how they're going to react until after we've said it. They might be fine with it. On the other hand, they might overreact to something that we thought was fine. We don't know it's definitely a conflict. We just don't know. We just know that we're not comfortable saying it. And if you can sort of set yourself a mission, like everything I'm uncomfortable saying, my mission is to get that list down to 0 by saying it all. I'll take whatever I can handle today and say that and see if that lifts my courage a little bit, and then I can say the next thing. It might be revealing shameful truths about yourself. It might be showing emotions that you usually hide. It might be telling people how you actually feel about them. It can be actions as well, like I started doing dancing, which I was ashamed of doing because my friends would make fun of me. It's about doing something that I felt was right for me in the face of potential judgment. And it's about letting go of the lies. I think it's Jordan Peterson says, tell the truth or at least don't lie. For a lot of guys, being honest might be too much of a stretch right now. It's too hard, too scary. But you can at least stop lying as much. Go silent where you'd usually lie. Like if you pretend to agree with someone, just don't say anything. If someone's not funny, at least don't laugh. Right? If somebody invites you to something you don't want to go to, don't go to it. Right? You don't even need to respond if you're not courageous enough yet, but stop deliberately doing things that are outright deception. Replace that with silence, and then slowly but surely start to express more honesty. And I haven't found a nice guy yet who isn't cured mostly by that. Mostly by more courageous confrontational honesty. Because no matter what type of nice guy you are, there's a type of honesty that you stay away from, and that's really what defines you as a nice guy. Maybe you don't show attraction, maybe you don't get into conflicts, maybe you don't go for what you really want, maybe you don't stand up to people in authority, maybe you don't show your opinions politically. There'll be a certain type of honesty that you never do because you're so unsafe doing it. And the key is, well, if anytime you are honest in that way, you're not being a nice guy in that moment. You're being something else and something real. So you're on track. And there's lots of other, like I said, every nice guy is different. Like when I work with my clients, we have a slightly different approach for every guy, depending on what he really should be working on most and what his real core values are. Sometimes I get a guy who you think is extroverted. It turns out he's not. He needs to learn how to just be okay with being quiet and letting people see that he doesn't actually like people a lot and so on, Other times you get someone who looks like an introvert, but they're actually just super suppressed. And when they're around people they feel safe, they're like, blah, 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 they get it all out and so on. But mostly it's just about whatever you actually are, that being the thing other people see, rather than this other thing that you use to keep them happy.
Yeah, I agree. I agree what you say, and that's also been my journey as well, to speak up and tell how I feel, and also to disagree. It's also okay to disagree, like, hey, I don't agree with you, and that's fine, because then you show also how you feel or how you look at things. And I see also with society, they were so afraid to share our opinion, to share how we feel, to look at things, because we're afraid to being judged or to be rejected. And we lost it, and we're going to change, like you said, we're going to change our behavior and then please this person, so we can get out of it safely, and we don't have to talk about it. But usually it comes back to you, because this person's like, hey, we're not done talking about this, come here, we need to talk about more about it. It's like, oh, not again. And we change back into the behavior to nurture everything. So that's important. Also, it's also what you said, if sometimes you need to kick against his legs, like, hey, show your balls and say, like, hey, no, stand your ground. It's going to help you, and also it's going to set boundaries. And that's so important, especially for nice guys, to set those boundaries for yourself and to others, like, hey, don't cross the line. And it's going to change a lot for you. But the last thing that I want to touch on, and I feel like this is really important that we can share or we can talk about, is shame. Because I saw it with myself. I was so ashamed of being a nice guy, so ashamed to be a virgin for such a long time, be ashamed to be the pickup, be ashamed not to have with other girls when I see other guys being with other girls. So shame, how is it for you also? And also, yeah, it's a tough topic to talk about, right, for guys.
Yeah, it is. And it's really the heart of it. And this is more general, in fact. Pretty much, I believe most mental illness is recovered, at least in part, by becoming shameless, or as shameless as possible. But even the word shameless, a lot of people associate that negatively. They think that that's being bad in some way, to be shameless. It's like you don't have any guilt for your behavior, or that you don't feel bad about doing things that harm people, that kind of thing. But shame really means you think there's something wrong with you. That's what shame means. And nobody else could do more harm to you than you thinking that. We generally learn that from other people through our childhood conditioning. It's our parents who tell us there's something wrong with us, even though it's just a normal natural trait. Or it's our friends who ostracize us for having a particular way of being that's actually fine. It's just not their preference. So we get told by someone else that it's wrong, and then we embody that, and now we're the ones telling ourselves that's wrong. And the way we tell ourselves is by not sharing it. So if I hide something from you, I automatically attach shame to it. There must be something wrong with me telling you this because I'm not telling you this. It's kind of logic that the brain seems to do. Say if I've got, like I used to have warts all over my hands. That was actually a big deal. I forget about that one all the time. When I was like 13 or 14, I was just covered in warts. I was so embarrassed about it. Like, it's so unattractive. So I used to actually even hold my hands in this weird kind of crippled looking way that I'd learned to cover all my warts at once, so you couldn't see them because they were all covered up, or I'd keep my hands in my pockets. That's shameful behavior. Whereas if I'd just been like, I'm wart boy, I would have still had the warts, but I wouldn't have that wrongness attached to them. And I wouldn't have like the years of fear of touching a woman and so on. Like, I'd be scared of escalating sexually with a woman because I'm scared I'd give her something, and so on. So I would actually subconsciously avoid opportunities to do something with a girl. One way to look at honesty is that the highest level of honesty is complete shamelessness, where the things you least want to say are the things you most often talk about. And for some people, this is, things they did in the past or elements of themselves that they think other people will judge them for. And a lot of the time, it's present stuff. It's just a feeling I'm having right now, or it's a thought I'm having right now that I think you won't like, or that you'll judge me for, or that other people watching will judge me for. The more often you can turn that into an expression rather than a suppression, the more often you become shameless. I mean, when I used to have so much erectile dysfunction when I was in my early 20s because I was just so anxious around women. The first time I spoke about that, I was shaking. It was just such a horrible thing to talk about. I thought I was going to throw up. By about the 100th time I was talking about it, it just felt like talking about what I had for breakfast. Now I talk about I don't feel a thing. I don't give a shit. I know people will have a range of responses to hearing I have that. Some will be sympathy, some will be outright hate and judgment, mockery, whatever. I just don't care. And the thing is, it's hard to express this until somebody's tested it. It's hard for them to believe. You think you care about other people judging you. You think it will bother you if they hate you. You think that's a big deal. And that thought keeps you shameful. It keeps you from expressing this stuff. But what you'll find when you experiment with it consistently is once you actually start saying the stuff, you'll realize you don't care that much about the reaction. You thought you would. You anticipated you would. But as soon as it gets out, you're like, fuck it. Let them know. It's not going to happen like that every time. But it's like this illusion that shame creates is, I'm scared of showing this to people. And you believe that you are. And then you do it and you're like, that wasn't so bad. I'm not actually afraid of that. And then you do it again and again, and then you get a general kind of fearlessness. You're like, fuck it, let them read my diary. I mean, my books are kind of like this. I often use my books as a double-up opportunity to be as shameless as I can with this big unknown audience. Not like I'm selling millions of copies or anything, but anyone could read my book. I don't know. I've got no power over that. I don't know who's going to. My own friends and family, complete strangers across the world, potential clients and employers. And so I think, man, if I can just put all the shit I'm most ashamed of into this book and then just throw it out into the universe where the information's like on the cloud, then it takes like any chance I have of hiding it away. It's out there now. It's freely accessible to anyone. And so the sense that I could ever hide it in a conversation or anything is pointless now. I'm like, fuck it, everyone knows anyway. And my experience is that shamelessness is just another word for self-confidence. The higher your level of shamelessness, the higher your self-confidence. They're not just correlation, but cause and effect. That confidence isn't really being good at stuff or being well-liked. It's having no shame. It's seeing you as you are and go, that's fine just as it is. Just let it out. See, the weird thing about my work is I'm not really doing self-development. I mean, I help some guys with communication skills and some basics like that. But most of my work is actually getting you okay with with yourself as you are. Through expression. Through showing it. And getting to the point where you always show it. Like if I've got a guy who's like autistic and he's worried about how that affects his communication, instead of working on his communication, I work on helping him say to people that I'm autistic and that you have to like work with my problems here, right? Or not even call them problems. And that way he doesn't even need to develop communication skills. He just needs to teach other people how to work with his autism. He doesn't need to work on his shit at all. He needs to make them work on it. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like the shortcut. Like you can either try and work on yourself to be something that other people like, or you can become okay with it and force them to make a decision as to whether or not they like it. And it's actually less work on your part. Now you're just talking.
True.
You don't have to learn shit. Pickup was like, you just have to learn all this complicated stuff to pretend to be something attractive. And then I learned actually if I'm just real honest, a certain percentage of women are attracted to me and the rest aren't. I just need to find that percentage and then that's it. I don't have to try to do anything. I just keep talking. Whoever I actually am either works or it doesn't, and it's already decided. Like when I get to the party or whatever, there are girls there who already will like me. They haven't even met me yet because of the way I am. And there's girls who won't. And there's guys who won't. And there's guys who will. And all I have to do is show who I actually am, and they'll make themselves known. And it's weird. It's like that. I go to a party now. I'm very fucking shameless these days. I go to a party now. I introduce to a bunch of people. Somebody who asks me, how are you? I'll give them an honest answer. Immediately, half the group walks away. I'm like, okay, got rid of most of them. I'll keep talking a bit more. Another few people walk away, and I'm left with like 1 or 2 people who are really into me. And I've been standing still the whole time just talking. I didn't do anything, right? I call that nuclear honesty, is drop the bomb and just see who's living afterwards. And it's actually really effortless, and it's actually really not that scary once you get into it. But getting into it's scary.
Yeah, it's really you're filtering out the right people that you're gonna be connected to and have a good conversation. That's what I really want to touch on. This is so important also for the guys that are listening to this, that you try to learn to be authentic and honest towards yourself, but also to other people. Because I had it also with a colleague. I was struggling, and then he asked me like, "Hey, what's up? How are you doing?" And I told him that I'm struggling with my porn addiction. And by my surprise, because you mentioned in the book, just say it, just say how you feel, what you're going through. And I said it, and he said like, "Yeah, I know, because I've been there too. I also had my struggles." And it was just like mind blows. Like, okay, people also go through this stuff. I'm not alone. And I felt so connected with this person afterwards, and we had a really good connection and a good talk with after that. And it made me realize that I have to be more open and share more about the things that I feel. And then, yeah, a lot of doors open. But I was so afraid to tell them that, because, like you said, you feel reject or you feel shame about it. But it wasn't that bad. But in my mind, it was going like, oh, what if he thinks I'm this or that, or maybe a loser, or I'm not sleeping with a lot of girls because I watch porn. But it wasn't like that. I made these stories up. So that was so important. I'm really happy that you touched on this and that you answered my question with shame, because I feel like that was for me my biggest problem, feeling ashamed of who I am, because I was keeping myself small. I let people walk over me. But if you just, like you said, just like own yourself and don't take it so serious, life gets so much easier. And that's what I tell myself sometimes. I make it so hard on myself, life, because I keep holding on this old identity and these old stories that are not mine. So I really want to touch that on. And I want to ask you for your journey and the things that you did. Do you have like 3 to 5 tips that you can give to nice guys or people that are in a relationship, that they can improve themselves to change that in a positive way and not be stuck in the nice guy?
3, I'll give you 3 just off the top of my head. I'll give you, like, I've got my 3X model, which is kind of like thinking and action and reflection. So I'll give you one from each. In terms of thinking, one thing you can do to become obsessed with, really, is before you talk, at least try to think of what the honest thing to say is. Now, you might not actually follow through on that. It might be too much. But at least know what it is. This at least stops you lying to yourself. So you become conscious of when you're lying to others, rather than sort of selling yourself a story that this is really true and technically it's not lying, or whatever you tell yourself. So if you just become like really hyper-focused during your interactions on, like, before you speak, what would be the really honest thing to say right now? What is it that's the actual truth in my head before I start trying to make them like me or anything? So that's tip number 1, just always be thinking about what the really honest thing to say is. Tip number 2, in terms of practical action, my number 1 tip always for nice guys is be honest about your preferences, if nothing else. What you like, what you dislike, what you want, what you don't want, what you're for, what you're against. Never pretend to be on the fence or easygoing about anything. Always pick a side and try to make sure you express the actual side that you're on. And it's in the little things that most of the work is done. Somebody like, oh, you like this song? Be able to say, nah, it's not my type of music. It's a big deal, actually, for a nice guy to say something like that.
Yeah.
You know, everyone says, like, oh, we're getting pizza for dinner. Oh, I'd rather have Chinese food, actually. I mean, you can still go with pizza because everyone else is, but at least let it be known that you wanted something else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and this particularly, like, whoever your high-risk people are, like, let's say it's dating, then do it with people you're attracted to, girls you're attracted to, or your partner. These are the ones you, like, show your preferences, because who you really are is just a collection of preferences, kind of like a binary code, a DNA strand. If we knew all of your preferences, we'd know exactly who you are and could predict your behavior every time you act. Right? So preferences is who we really are. So the more honest you are about those, the more real you're being. And you can do this at a very small level where you'd usually lie or pretend. Just flick the switch and be honest. And in terms of reflection, I'd suggest keeping a journal if you don't already. And the journal's just focused on nice guy investigation. What were some of the key things you did that day? Why did you really do them? How do they compare to you, like having integrity or being real? Give yourself a pat on the back when you did something that was bold and real. And give yourself a little fucking smack in the face when you knew it wasn't. At least know and see it. Start to see how it is that you manipulate people, how it is that you manipulate yourself first, so that you don't feel bad about manipulating them, like the story you tell yourself to justify your nice guy behaviors. And watch the story so you can catch it next time it's happening. Like, I'm telling myself that bullshit story again so that I can get away with lying, or so I can guilt trip them into liking me or whatever. And then notice, like, you do something you're proud of, like, fuck, I wish I did that more often. You get a little bit of a buzz from it. And overall, this creates a picture where you just become, like, really focused on trying to increase a little bit by little bit how real you're being. You don't need to do it all at once. It's too scary. I didn't do it all at once. That would have been too much. I did it piece by piece. Every now and then I'd lose a friend, or I'd have to change a job, or I'd get embarrassed. There's these little things where I had to pay for being real, and being real comes at a cost, because it's not being real that hurts. It's undoing the lies. So if you lose a friend from being real, it wasn't being real that made them go away. It was lies. They shouldn't have been there in the first place. It's the lies that hurt you. You got to get it out of your head that honesty is painful and brutal and it causes all these bad reactions. Not if you're always honest, it doesn't. If you switch from being dishonest to honest, yeah, you're going to get some fucking reactions. And it's what I call the transition phase. All my clients go through it. It can last up to a year, depending on how hard they're working, where they have to like break everything that they built and replace it. But once it's replaced, when you're honest all the time, then you're only surrounded by people who are supportive of that. You're only doing a job that welcomes you being that way. You're only in hobbies where it's perfectly aligned with what you like. And so you don't get all this resistance. I hardly ever have confrontations now, because I'm surrounded by people who generally quite like me and respect my boundaries. And I don't even need to say my boundaries. They're so respectful. But in my transition phase, I felt like I was, fighting off bulls all the time. It was insane how many conflicts I got, But it was either that or just be lonely and miserable and depressed all the time. So I chose that instead.
Yeah, well then, that's really powerful, and yeah, this has been really helpful for me as well, because yeah, I struggle a lot, and it's really to not owning my authentic self and not show up and tell people what I really feel. And also what you said, what I really like is with the pizza. It's so important to also share your desires. If you want to eat something else, you tell this person that you want to eat something else. It's really simple, but it embodies yourself to or feel and learn that it's okay to share your opinion or to get out of it. And you feel a lot better doing it, because then you don't keep it for yourself. And I feel like that's so important, that it's also relief, because we keep so much to ourselves. We like you said, we build so much tension and then we explode. And it's really unnecessary. We put so much pressure and pain towards ourselves, and it's really, really unnecessary. And I really want to tell people that you have to learn to, like what Dan said, to let go of your authentic self, or let go of your beliefs and who you are, that you are a nice guy, because I felt that too, that I cannot change who I am and I'm gonna be this person or this nice guy the rest of my life. But it doesn't, because I'm learning now slowly, step by step, to be authentic and tell people how I feel. And then it's life changing, and it's such a good feeling, and everybody should learn to that. And not just for men but also for women as well, that they also, for men and women, is also different dynamics with masculine and feminine, and men are more logical, women are more emotional. But still, it's important to at least tell how you feel about it. And like you said, people are gonna come and go, and that's life. But we want to control everything and harness everything and make, like you say, manipulate everything to keep ourselves safe and everything. So it's it was a big life change, and especially with your books and the things that you teach, that helped me a lot, and I'm really grateful for knowing about your work, and that I'm really grateful for that you're doing those things. And I really want to thank you for this amazing interview. I learned a lot, and I hope the listeners also gonna pick something from it and also check your work out. So how can they follow you, Dan?
Right, yeah. I mean, if they just want to get in touch with me, they can just email me, dan@brojo.org. I just usually just have personal relationships with people. It's the best way to do things. But I have a newsletter called The Daily Dose of Integrity. I think if you Google that, it should come up. It's on Substack. And that's the best way to get a taste of my work. I put out daily short newsletters with bits of advice and insights and links to my longer content and stuff. So if you wanted to get to know me and follow my work, that'd be the best spot. Yeah.
Great. Can they also follow you on social media, or is it the best way to follow you on the newsletter?
Yeah, I'm on all the things. I can send you the links or something. But Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, all that stuff.
Cool.
It's basically
I will put it in the show notes.
Yeah, sweet.
Well, Dan, I really want to thank you for your time. I'm really grateful for having this conversation because I had you on my list to interview for a long, long time, because I've seen how important it is to talk about this, because it's also like this taboo. There's nothing wrong with us, and a nice guy is being okay, but it puts so much pressure on ourselves, and also in relationships, we're not going after what we want. And it's like you said, we're going to put ourselves in such a box, and we're not living life. We just pretend that everything is going to be okay, just being nice, and the world is going to change around us. And it's not living, it's really dying. That's what I've seen with myself. And really my goal is also for my listeners also, to get out of their shell and get out of the real potential that's been buried inside of themselves, that they don't see anymore, and really live authentically. I lost you, but Dan, I really want to thank you so much for your time again, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me, dude, and wishing you all the best with your show. And we'll stay in touch.
Thank you. We will. Thank you so much, Dan. Take care.
All right, cheers, mate. See you later.
Hey, Lions. Thank you for listening. Glad to have you on our journey to the authentic self. Want to learn more to embrace your potential? I invite you to keep listening. Do me a favor and smash the like and subscribe buttons, as this helps the show reach more listeners who need to hear these messages. See you next time.